Some airline passengers are really not happy about an airline's new policy of weighing passengers. This is two American Samoan businessmen who have filed complaints with the U.S. Transportation Department saying that they were weighed before they boarded a flight from Honolulu and assigned specific seats to keep the aircraft load evenly distributed. This is according to Radio New Zealand. Hawaiian Airlines' new policy, which is a response, they say, to the average increase in passenger weight, meant that anybody flying to or from Pago Pago, the capital of American Samoa, can no longer choose their own seats online, and they may have to be weighed before boarding the plane so that airline staff can decide where on the plane they should sit for proper weight distribution. The airline told a radio station that the increased girth of the typical passenger means they now need to distribute weight in a very particular way on their Boeing 767 cabins to meet the manufacturer guidelines. And this means the number of adults per row need to be limited. We need to reserve seats in certain rows for young children. And additionally, particularly heavy passengers need to be distributed in a very particular way. However, Avamua Dave Halleck, who's one of the two businessmen who was involved and upset here, believes that this is a discriminatory rule because it applies only to those flying to or from American Samoa. Why? Why would this involve people flying to or from American Samoa? Well, you might not know this, but American Samoa has the highest rate of obesity in the world. Something like 75% of adults are considered obese. And that is actually old data from about 8 years ago. Some say that over 90% of the American Samoan population currently is obese. Samoa Air 3 years ago was the first airline to change how they would charge passengers, charging passengers based on their size. And many people are upset about this, but I'm not just sure. I'm not sure about the being upset thing because, listen, number one, weight on an airplane is an issue. There are two really important ways in which weight impacts an airplane. One is total weight at takeoff and landing, which changes because you burn fuel during the flight, and you've got to be aware of both your takeoff weight and your landing weight. And number two, the distribution of weight within the plane is very, very important. And for small planes, being overloaded or overweight or having uneven weight distribution is a huge risk, and it causes accidents. Larger planes have more of a tolerance, but this is, objectively speaking, a major safety issue. Further, it is backed by data that American Samoa has an extremely high obesity rate. And if you imagine, on balance, the airline is counting on the fact that for every overweight person, you have some tolerance, and you'll have someone who's thin or a kid or someone with no luggage or something like that. If 90% of the population in a particular place is obese, this becomes a mathematical question. So I don't know, Rachel, is there something to be offended about here?
I don't believe so, but there was a man last year who was flying on American Airlines, and he claimed that he was kicked off for being overweight because the woman next to him was saying he didn't fit correctly in the seat, and he was kind of spilling over into her seat, and there was this whole controversy about it, and he said he felt like he was treated like a fat criminal. So I do think if it's done in that way, it should probably be avoided. However, I don't know if this is completely discriminatory. And another thing also is that I think if the catalyst is safety, then that's critical, that's important. However, I know Ryanair, which is a historically sketchy European airline company, is a huge proponent of this tax, but the way that they want to do it is to charge people for every pound that they are overweight.
Right. Yeah. And I've had experiences where I was sitting next to a passenger of size, and at its base, at its most base analysis, I paid for an entire seat on the flight, and that includes the width of the seat. And because I was up against a window and next to a passenger of size, I did not have an entire seat. I factually speaking didn't have an entire seat. So from a passenger rights perspective, if I paid for an entire seat and I didn't have an entire seat, you would think that there's something there that has to be dealt with. On the same hand, if you, as a passenger of size, paid for one seat and are occupying a seat and a half or two, you could make the same argument there. And some airlines have started to go that route, which is if at check-in you are observed to be larger than one seat's width or size, then you are told you're going to have to buy two tickets. that is separate than, if one or two passengers of size on a plane are not going to cause a safety issue, but they are going to inconvenience a couple of people sitting next to them. That is very, very different. What I'm seeing here with the Hawaiian Airlines stuff, it does appear to be primarily based on a safety issue. And really, guys, why would an airline all of a sudden come up with this just to fat shame if it doesn't present any kind of issue? I mean, aren't airlines busy enough than to put in fat shaming policies? I don't know.